Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. Jesse, as always, it is great to see you. And with all the things, I'm recording this in real time. This won't air for a couple of weeks, but just, in the middle of this crazy week that has been with all of the turmoil happening in the country and in churches, churches on the East Coast, we had a lot more people kind of show up, and I heard stories anecdotally about people that were coming back to church after a long time or giving it another try. It felt very similar, not as big, but a similar feel as when like 9/11 happened, in that there seemed to be more of a searching. And it's funny because you were talking about churches out in the Pacific Northwest, and that, at least in your context, wasn't something that you were seeing. Yeah. So it's like we sort of don't know when the next moment's going to happen. But my question, and the question really is the overarching question of today's episode, is, are you ready for whenever that next thing happens? Like, as your church, how long are we going to sit around and wait to make the changes that we know we need to make because they're too uncomfortable, or maybe we're worried we don't have the resources or the buy-in or whatever, and so we just keep putting it up, kicking it down the road? And if this last week really reminded me of something, it's like, we don't have time to just kick this down the road forever.
Yeah. There's sometimes where we know there's something that needs to change, or a process or a system that we need to create, or we know, it's so often, Jason, we know the kind of the right answer or something that needs to happen. We might not have the tools or the know-how to do it, but there's a problem that we know needs to get solved, but there's not the will to then take it on.
Yeah.
Or there's some disconnect that happens there, or we say, we'll do it later. And I've just noticed, I would say in the last maybe year and a half or so, we've been coming back to some things that need to change, or some problems that we need to solve again, and that we haven't been attentive to in a while. And I'd say sometimes when you're beginning some of those things, it can feel a little bit like ripping a Band-Aid off. It hurts at first because you have to acknowledge we haven't been doing this so well, or we've been ignoring this problem for a while, or whatever. And I just, think about, once the Band-Aids peel off, then it's off, and now we can get to work or whatever. But that first little bit, I think, sometimes gets in the way of us beginning the process of making the changes that we need to make. So we're going to be talking about some of that today, and we're going to be looking at some of what you all have been experiencing at Tower Hill, and some of the change you've been navigating, just thinking about how do we do the things that we need to do to be ready for when God does send people our way, so that we're prepared to welcome them and to disciple them and to do all those things.
Yeah. And speaking of welcoming, I just want to welcome everybody who's listening to the podcast. And I know we got a lot of new pastors on here, and it's great to have you. So glad that you're finding us and hopefully finding this helpful. If you want more information on us, you can sign up to receive our newsletter, get on our mailing list. And you just do that by going to reclaimleader.com, and you'll see the links up there to go to newsletter, sign up, and you get that about every other week is about the rate that we're doing it. I hate getting too many emails, so I try to keep it at a minimum, but just to kind of keep you connected, informed, and give you some more information about each episode as it comes out. Today, again, talking about adaptive change, I think the important thing first is just to acknowledge what adaptive change is.
Sure, yeah.
And it's just the fact that there's no template answer to your problem. It's something that you have to figure out.
That's right, yeah.
Right? And that's, in a way, it's so freeing, Jesse. I felt like helping our congregation understand that. It felt freeing, like, oh, this hasn't been figured out yet.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're behind or we're doing it wrong necessarily. It's like we just got to figure out how we're going to address this problem, because each issue, although there's similarities to problems we all face in the church, they're as unique as our churches and our circumstance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes, you might find some sort of solution to plug in here and there. But overall, when we're trying to solve big things in the life of the church, I mean, it was, Heifetz and Linsky and those guys way back in Leadership and on the Line and some of those books, helping us think about the shift from what we would call technical change to adaptive change. And technical change, we go to an expert and we say, hey, give us the part, give us the system, give us the product that we can plug in to make the change that's needed. And what I think we're realizing in today's time, in a world in which change is so rapid around us, that kind of technical expertise isn't always what works anymore. And so what Heifetz actually says in his book is he says, when it comes to adaptive change, the people with the problem are the ones that are going to have to work together to come up with the solution.
Yeah.
You're the ones that have the local knowledge, the understanding of your system and the way things work. And you're the ones who are going to have to do the work of leading that change and identifying the things that you want to try. So I think it's empowering and also a little bit like, wouldn't it be nice if we just had the silver bullet that we could plug in and fix it all? And it's just not the way things are.
Boy, I've wished that a time or two.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right. So if you've been listening with us in real time, then if you listen for a while, then you know that my church, Tower Hill, has been undertaking this new change for our Sunday schedule. And we started talking about it like a year and a half, maybe longer ago. We started kind of shots over the bow, like, oh, this is coming. And it was all based on our worship schedule being inadequate to accommodate the growth of especially our Sunday school age families as they were joining the life of Tower Hill. We're experiencing a season of growth. And we knew that we had to figure out a way to move some people between the services. Otherwise, it was all going to stall out. We wouldn't have more room. And needlessly so, that we knew that we could make room if we changed our schedule. So we did a whole process. We'll talk about that in a minute. Did a task force and everything. So finally, and after enduring especially the last 30 days before we did it, Jesse, it was an onslaught of criticism.
I bet it was.
Finally, so the early results are in. I feel like it's like when you watch those guys talking about the election results, and so it could change, but at least at first, the early results. And we're not calling the state yet, but the early results are in that it has done everything that we hoped it would do in the first couple of weeks that we've been running this new schedule. So what happened? Well, we knew we need to make more room for young families, so we swapped our first and our third service. And so we put our traditional pipe organ, chancel choir, handbells service the end of the morning. And we put our second contemporary service early in the morning and added another Sunday school hour. And it has worked. So we have more kids coming the last 2 weeks than we have ever at Tower Hill. And we would not have fit them if they came to one service. In fact, what's crazy is we've had, well, at least this last week, we had more kids than we get at VBS come to a Sunday school morning. And then, just in the building, in all of our services, the numbers are the highest that we've ever seen in September. And it's not just about numbers, just the whole vibe of everything. And again, we did a whole month of a sermon series talking about getting in the game and signing up and pledging to attend a service. And it's been a really long run to get here. But the other thing we saw on Sunday, it was our beach baptism Sunday, where we saw 15 new first-time baptisms, then about 35 folks who wanted to remember their baptisms in the ocean here about a mile away. And it was really cool because you really get a sense of God's movement. It's not just about creating a crowd. Are we making disciples? And it felt really good after this weekend to say yes. But all of that said, we didn't know if any of it was going to work. We prayerfully worked on it together. We had challenges we didn't know the answer to. We spent a long time thinking about it, probably too long, to be honest. There was a good amount of resistance even until the end. Would it work? Would they show up? There was a lot of pressure. And there are two things that made it work. Well, besides the obvious, God made it work. God instilled the desire for us to make the change, all of it. So let's not Let's keep it real. It was the Holy Spirit's doing. However, on our side of it, on the human side of it, it took a couple of things. One is having the right posture about it. And then the second, having a good process around it. So I want to talk about both those things, the importance of the posture and the process when it comes to your church and leading adaptive change. Okay, so let's talk about posture. I think that the image is very simple, almost to the point where it might feel trite, but it's very true. The image of the open hand compared to the closed fist.
Mhm.
When it comes to evaluating your church, praying about change, thinking about what needs to be done, it's like, give me all the ideas. Let's do this really open-handedly until we land on something that we think we want to try. And even then it might not work. Just holding those things loosely, and to understand that innovation is a team sport, and you can't get married to ideas too soon in the process. You just got to keep spitting them out. You got to keep chewing on them and keep working on them. It's like Guy Kawasaki, when he did a talk I heard on innovation. This was years ago. It may have been at the Catalyst conference, but I don't remember. He was talking about changes in technology mostly. Of course, he wasn't really talking about the church, but he said, there's a time when they would go around your town and wagons would carry blocks of ice. That's how you got your ice, which it wasn't even that long ago. It's just crazy to think about that.
Right.
And, there were ice harvesters. That was their job. And they'd go out to wherever they'd go, Alaska, I don't know where they went. And they would cut out these big chunks of ice and bring them back to the towns. That was a whole industry. Ice harvester to ice deliverer was a whole thing. And then somebody came up with the idea of a freezer. And that completely changed the game. It jumped a curve, if you will.
Yeah. Disrupted a whole industry. Even the icebox maker, the whole industry is upended by this new thing called refrigeration. And now what are we going to do? How
Exactly
are we going
right.
to make our way through this world that
Exactly
has this
right.
thing called refrigeration?
And he said innovation jumps curves. And the thing that he was trying to get across, I think is important for us to understand, is the people that invented the freezer were not the ice harvesters and ice deliverers. It didn't come from them. It came from outside of them. And to think about, if all of your decision making for adaptive change is coming from the same people who have been a part of creating the current systems, you're going to have a really hard time jumping the curve. It's usually going to come from some other voices that aren't in the room yet. Mostly those are younger voices. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just voices that you've not utilized, because you know what happens in church? It's like you have super volunteers that have been doing it for decades, and they have a lot of say and influence. And unintentionally, they're just sort of abdicated. They're just given a bunch of power. And it's like, then you got to check with them to make sure you can do the change, right? Everybody sort of defers to them. And they're usually kind of a strong personality and all of that. But I just like the idea of the posture of innovation, or the posture of adaptive change is, we got to hear from people who aren't in the room right now.
That's right. Yeah. I think that's so wise. We have a sign here at Marine View that says, who's representing the voice of the one who's not here yet?
I love that.
It's just a reminder that we need lots of input in order to build ideas that are going to go. And here's the thing. I think I hear you say that, and part of me goes, how dare those grumpy old people hold on to their traditions or something? That's not what we're saying at all.
No.
You can have amazing people, even now that we've been doing it for a long time, Jason. Maybe it's even people like you and me we're the ice harvester, and we know how to do it efficiently.
I promise you that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've gotten really good at it. In fact, we're probably doing a great job and thinking about, how do we do it better, more efficiently? How do we create a better ice box and a better train car for our ice blocks? But it's not unless we open up to other voices that we might even hear about the kinds of things that would say, why ice blocks at all? What about this other way? And we go, oh, I never would have thought of that. So I like what you're saying, just that open hand to really try to sound out ideas from lots of different kind of constituencies or groups or folks whose voices maybe aren't always represented in the room, to think about what the things we should maybe be trying might be.
Yeah. And how do we do that? So one of the ways that I like to do it is I'll just put like a little ad hoc group together. I'll invite some people and maybe we'll have pizza together or something. I'll just ask them a bunch of questions. I'm like, hey, I just want to pick your brains on this. Can we get together? And you could populate those pizza rooms with whomever you want. And it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but just start exposing, them to the idea and just listening. I think it's just about listening and being intentional about how do I hear some different voices other than the ones that are in the room. And it was John Acuff he talks about leading change and momentum. He says, momentum never happens without people.
Right.
So don't forget, it's not just a brainstorm whiteboard. It's got to be tethered to relationship. It's got to be tethered to investing in people. And he says, you ask 3 questions. It's super simple. Ask 3 questions. What do the people need? What do you have? What does the church has that fills those needs? And that's where you got to be honest. If you started the church today, what would you keep and what would you not? What do people say about us?
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, then how do we close the gap to what the people need and what we have that fills those needs? That helps you in the adaptive change posture to be thinking not about you, but about the people that you're trying to serve. Mm-hmm. So again, I think it's about innovation, hearing different voices, but remembering it's about the people. Mm-hmm. It's not just about whatever new initiative that you're going to do.
Yeah. So it keeps the mission in mind, right? The front end is what are we trying to accomplish? Well, we're trying to reach people. And we're trying to help meet the needs of our community. And so how do we do that? And so I like that. You got to keep that focus clear. Otherwise, then it'll just be variations on the same themes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we try to share the posture of adaptive change with the congregation as much as we can. So a lot of things I've said on the journey specifically about the worship times is, and I think this came from Pastor Teresa. You remember Pastor Teresa? We had her on the phone a long time ago. Yeah. She's about to retire, by the way, which is crazy. But one of the things is we kept saying like, worship times didn't come down on the stone with the 10 commandments. Like we could change those as many times as we need to. We might do this and it might not work. This is an experiment we're going to try. We think it's going to work.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, we'll pivot. And I think getting the congregation used to the fact that this is like a ministry lab, not where we're sort of giving things from on high and we're just not reacting in real time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I think ideas language is really powerful. And in fact, it invites people to kind of think and dream. We have an idea. We want to try. We want your feedback. We want your input. Hey, we should try this and let's see what happens. What if? And I wonder, and that kind of language kind of, again, is that open hand you're talking about that kind of invites a dreaming and a possibilities rather than a clinging to and holding on to. And I know some people listening, I imagine it's possible that your church service times are written literally in stone or wood on a sign outside your church, right? I know, I've seen it before. So it's like, whoa. But if we're able to demonstrate somehow that even something like our Sunday schedule can be adjusted for the sake of our mission, then, it really can kind of just loosen everything up for all kinds of other change. So that's a hard one. That's a big one because people become attached to the time they go to church. And I'm sure we'll get to hear a little bit more about that. But if you can use that ideas language, it can invite people to dream about the possibilities and instead of getting fixated on what they might lose or holding on to what they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, making about the people is you're showing that you love the people who also don't agree with the change because you're investing in the people. So I just had an interaction with someone who was mad about the change. And ever since we announced it, like I think it was the first Sunday in June, we announced that it was coming and he hasn't been to church since. And the rest of his family has been, but they go to the contemporary service and he's a traditional worshiper. And I saw his wife in a coffee shop this morning. I said, "Oh, how's he doing, man? Tell him I miss him." And she's like, "I will." And he sent me an email today saying, basically, I'm sorry, I've been upset, but I'll see you on Sunday.
Excellent. Yeah.
You know?
Sometimes people need space to warm up to change too. We
Exactly.
can be
And it's about the people. And I just said, I just miss you, man. I love you. I wish.
I like that posture, Jason, because there's a humility in there, and it's not an ego thing. I'm not controlling this so that I get my way. It's because we discern this together, and we think this is what is a good idea to try for the sake of what God wants to do through us, and trust that maybe not everybody will warm up. That's such a heartening story, because sometimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Somebody says, "Peace, I'm out of here," and never comes back. But that's good.
Totally.
Yeah.
I at least appreciate when they tell me.
Yeah.
It's the ones that don't say anything that just bolt, and you're just like, whatever happened to them?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they weren't happy. Okay, so posture is a big part of it.
Totally.
But then it's also process. And the first thing I'll say about process is you can't, as a leader, you cannot navigate adaptive change just all by yourself.
Yeah.
And I know we must intuitively know that as leaders. I don't think our listeners are dumb. I just think the default is it's easier to do it myself and I could do it faster and all of that, but it rarely ever goes better.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a sort of a funny example of this. And believe me, I made the mistake of leading change by myself, the whole Lone Ranger thing, and it just crashed and burned. But this is when we were changing our sanctuary. And I know you know this story, but for our listeners, in case they never heard it, is I had this idea because we were wrestling about, there's all this people up in arms that we're going to let coffee in the sanctuary, and I had this idea of making these very tasteful coffee holders that we could put attached to the pews. And not only was it a bad idea, you would have thought I threatened somebody's firstborn just by whispering the idea. And it was so rebuked, Jesse, that it just reminded me it's a good thing that I don't just charge ahead with every idea that comes in my head.
Right.
You got to have a process with other people in it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it could work. Maybe it was the best idea in the world. And then who gets all the credit? Jason does. And we love Jason as a leader. And boy, the next time we need a good idea, we should ask Jason. And as long as the winning streak keeps going, that's great. Yeah. But then you're out there on your own when the opposite happens too. And so building a coalition or a group of people behind a change, it's just healthy. It's who we should be as Christians, but also it kind of creates greater buy-in. It adds some protection for you as a leader. I mean, there's just a lot of wisdom and why you want to go about building a team or a coalition of people rather than just going it on your own. And as leaders, we talk about this a lot. We can't help but want to charge ahead. We're leaders. I mean, leaders want to go out further ahead than everybody else is ready for. And partly it's our job to do that. We need to be out there looking and going, I wonder what the possibilities are. I wonder what's around that corner. And yet we have to also remember to come back and check in with our people and make sure that everybody's moving down the trail. It's not just about us getting to some destination. It's about all of us moving together to where God wants us to be. So anyway, I'm glad you mentioned that because it really is a crucial piece of a puzzle. And if you're trying to lead change on your own, it's going to be a bumpy road.
There's a lot to say there about how do you put together a process, and we've done some episodes on that. I wish, Jesse, that I was a better podcaster and say, well, in episode 234,
That's right. Yeah.
We're both in full-time ministry. Like I just don't have time to look all that stuff up. But I think just thinking about like, how do I put together a good process?
Yeah.
Is something that's important. And then the other side of process is something that not everyone really thinks about, and that is your systems in your church. Is that your systems really determine what happens with adaptive change, because if your systems don't adapt, they're always going to want to, the gravitational pull is always to go back to what status quo was.
Equilibrium. Yeah.
Exactly right. So handle systems with care. Start with humility. hey, I don't love our giving system or our whatever system, stewardship, or pick a system in your church. Start with humility and openness to learning from others.
Mhm.
If you're at your church less than 5 years, I think you need a little more time to really be their pastor, right? You're playing the long game. In other words, I like, if you're brand new in your church, I wouldn't just come in, Yahoo, and just kind of, destroy everything that they've done, but just to listen. And but let's talk about a couple of those systems that I think can help you when it comes to leading adaptive change. And we'll go quick on this. The first is your org chart. And some of you listening, maybe you're in a small church, you're like, that's hilarious. What org chart? It's me and a part-time custodian and maybe an admin.
Sure.
And yes, that's fine. But this still applies to you. So one of the things that happens often is that if you're not thinking about what needs to be done in the church and who do we need to do it,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for you to sort of envision anything different than what you have.
Yeah.
So here's what I mean. Some of the problems are you'll get orphaned ministries or too many cooks in the same kitchen, or no clear leadership in a ministry area, or dysfunction. So I always say staff for growth, not for maintenance. So think about this. If you were starting over and you said, this is an area that I think has real growth potential, ask yourself, how are we staffed in that area?
Mm-hmm.
Are we staffed for who we are? Are we staffed for who we were?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we staffed for who we want to be or who we think we could be? I think you put your best talent and resources where your opportunities are. And how do you do that if, maybe you are a small church, you don't have much of a staff? Well, one of the things, and this was straight from North Point strategy that I loved and I've adopted years ago, is add blank boxes to the org chart.
Mm-hmm.
And pencil in, we want a youth minister. You don't know who that is yet. You can just put youth minister, or you could put your name in there or whatever until you get where you want to be. It's like a vision placeholder for where you think God wants to take your church. And it's funny, what happens is when you do that, I feel like the resources follow. It's like when you kind of set that vision ahead, you start finding ways to fulfill it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the science of that is. I just know what the heart of that is that seems to work.
Yeah, I think it's a vision. It's a direction to move in. And then when we're thinking about that and keeping that in focus, it is going to have a gravitational pull in that direction. So you're putting something out there that then we can move toward. And that, I think, is helpful for any group of any kind, but is really important in the life of the church. And for us, sometimes, we're kind of a medium church and we don't always have money for new staff things that we would like to do. So sometimes we think in terms of like a volunteer staff position, like giving them the authority to function as if they're staff, but they're doing it in a voluntary capacity. And maybe it fills into a paid staff position at some point or turn whatever. But it's a way to make traction and to take some of your best people and deploy them in that area where there's opportunity. So it could be in a smaller church that you say, oh, so-and-so just retired and they're saying, I got a lot of time on my hands. Let me know I can help around the church. You're like, hey, I have a box on my org chart I really need some help with. And maybe it's for a season, maybe it's for a longer time, but find some people to fill those things in and make some progress on them.
Yeah. And that's where these two ideas connect. So let's say your adaptive change is we want to kind of restructure or build our youth ministry, and we really need somebody who's got some training or to put at least in a part-time role. Our current org chart, that does not exist. So let's dream about how do we change the process or the system to accommodate the adaptive change. This is really what we're talking about. These two things.
Totally is. Yeah. And one good strategy for that, sometimes, again, thinking about our experience, sometimes when you create a spot like that and you don't have an obvious person in your church, and doing a big search process is going to be a tough lift. When you find a volunteer and you say, hey, could you take on middle school youth? 98% of the time, the answer is going to be, I'm not equipped for that. The answer is no. So one of the things that we've done to kind of in certain areas like that is that we'll ask two people to team up to take it on together. And there's something disarming about knowing they're not going to be on their own in that. That is helpful. So I think there's ways to do that structurally that get people involved and move things forward, and help kind of eliminate some of the obstacles to making that happen. So anyway, lots of tips and tricks, but I think this is spot on. Thinking about structurally, what do we need to do to move toward the change that we want to see?
And if you're in a larger church, I think one of the biggest things that happens with the org chart is you just get too mired down in people not knowing who's accountable to whom and having clear lines of communication in that way. So again, the whole staff-led, elder-governed, people-gifted, or people-equipped is a way of thinking about that. We let our staff make most of the decisions, and our elders or our board, if you will, they're responsible to fuel the work that they've charged the staff to do. So they fuel it spiritually. They build budgets to empower them to do it, and it's a collaborative process, but it's very clear who reports to who, how does that work. And that's a really important thing that a lot of churches get stuck in.
Yeah. Is there a resource that you go to or point to for that kind of organizational structuring? Anything that comes to mind?
It's funny. I don't know that we do. We just start with clarity. Clarity is your friend in all of this. So every time we train new elders every year, we talk about this is how it works in our church. This is the process. If you want to get something in an announcement on a Sunday morning, this is the filter. This is the process. You may not get a yes. And if you don't get a yes, there are other ways we could communicate what you want. And it starts on the staff level, right? So we just try to make it clear that these are the folks who report to these folks. And because the big problem in at least Presbyterian churches is that elders think it's their job to micromanage the staff.
Yeah.
And usually the pastor's the head of staff. And so they're hearing from two, and sometimes they're hearing from multiple elders what they think they should be doing.
Multiple bosses, and now we're in office space all of a sudden, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. One resource I'd point to is called Winning on Purpose. It's just a model to consider how you can understand the roles of pastor as leader, and then your board as governance, as like vision, direction, guidance, and spiritual stewardship, and then your staff as kind of the implementers, and then the people as the doers of ministry who are being equipped and mobilized to do it. So very much in line with what you're talking about right there, and probably needs to be adapted into your particular polity or kind of way of being, but there's some good guidance out there on how to structure for the sake of clear line of sight organizationally.
Yeah. And then I just want to touch on real quick, the other kind of system that is usually problematic is your budget or your finance stewardship system. And this is because, especially when you're leading adaptive change, the bean counters who do their job beautifully, they always want to control the process. And the problem is that it tries to pull vision into a spreadsheet. You eventually want it to become a spreadsheet because you want to be able to follow up with it in really detailed action items. But if you start there, there's never room in the spreadsheet for the new vision.
That's right.
Right. So it's developing an entitlement versus a vision budget. All right. And we talk about this a lot. But again, so many churches get stuck here, and that is, how's your budget process work? Do you just do the same thing and add 10% to everybody's budget? Or if you can't quite afford it, you decide, well, someone's only getting 2% or whatever. Is it all based on what you spent last year? If so, maybe a better move is to move to a vision budget where you sort of take everything off and say, what do we really think? What's the one big thing we think God is pushing us to do this year? And start there and work your way that way. The funny thing is you end up with almost the same budget, but now you know why you're doing everything.
It's about the why. That brings us back to our mission purpose. And I would say, when I do that with our team, like most of the things are going to end up back on there. What are we doing? We're going to have to pay the utilities. We're going to have to, pay our staff. It's like 95% of the budget is already spoken for. It is. So then you go, but if we start from the other direction and say, what is the thing that we're called to now? And is this still serving that purpose? Or is something need to give way in order for us to better fulfill that purpose? I think it's actually an invigorating thing, even for the finance guys to go, oh, this is good stewardship, right? So we're being thoughtful and planning and not just, hoping for the best.
Yeah. And you're going to need to lean on those bean counters to count the beans at some point. So just reassure them of that, but just say, hey, look, but we want to make sure we make room for this thing we feel God's calling us to do. Because if you try to squeeze it in, I mean, I'll just never forget. I was helping a church. They were talking about, oh yeah, we're all in on youth ministry. And I said, well, what's your budget? I said, oh, we just did the budget. Great. What's your youth ministry budget? And it was like $500 or something. And I'm like, this is all in. This is like a 1/1000th of your budget.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's sort of like, show me your budget. I'll show you what your church cares about.
Mm-hmm.
And so just make sure when you're leading change that you set yourself up for success by giving yourself the resources you need to actually do it. So it takes that balance between posture and process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. Good stuff, Jason. I think, anytime we're talking change management, how do we do it? I mean, that's why we started having these conversations, because we're constantly leading change, and maybe you're in a season where now you're changing the things that you helped come up with, and that's kind of you and I now, or maybe you're kind of newer in and you're like, okay, how do I go about leading change? Well, it's never a finished product, but there's these techniques and things that we can learn, that we can apply from a posture and a process standpoint, that then make change healthier, more doable, and more consistent, I think, in the life of the church. So anyway, always love talking shop around these things, Jason. Thanks for bringing this today.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for listening. If you ever want to reach out, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. We're happy to talk with you and to help however we can. And as we go, we're praying for your churches. I pray that God helps you continue to lead well, that all of our churches become healthier, flourishing churches that reach a world that so desperately needs Jesus. So with that, thanks so much, everyone. As we say every week, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Take care.